In this section, we'll look at how events developed in 1938 and through most of 1939 until September 1st, 1939, when the war officially began. In Europe, Hitler turned his attention to Austria, one of the remnants of the Austrian-Hungarian Empire and solidly Germanic. With Germany threatening intervention and encouraging Austrian Nazis, the Austrian government proposed a plebiscite, a vote. The Germans, however, simply took over on March 12, 1938, before the plebiscite could take place. The Germans then held their own plebiscite vote, which of course showed support for the union with Germany. While many Austrians wanted to remain independent, the so-called Union or Anschluss was still popular with a great number of Austrians. The German troops were largely met with cheering crowds. The Allies, meanwhile, protested, but they didn't do anything substantial, which of course was another example of appeasement. Each time Hitler initiated a new controversy and the Allies backed down with more appeasement, Hitler's popularity grew. Appeasement begetted more aggression. As soon as the Anschluss had passed in 1938, Hitler began agitating for control of the Sudetenland. Formerly a part of Austria-Hungary, the Sudetenland now was the western edge of the nation of Czechoslovakia, which had been created by World War I, or after World War I. It had, however, a German-speaking population of over 3 million people, which Hitler claimed faced persecution. With more aggression appearing imminent, the leaders of France and Britain came on a diplomatic mission to Munich, Germany, the so-called Munich Accords that is an agreement, to see if they could resolve the crisis diplomatically. Czechoslovakian leaders weren't even invited. In signing the Munich Accords in September 1938, Hitler promised no more demands, no more aggression, and was rewarded with the annexation of the Sudetenland as he had demanded. Landing in London, the British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain held up a piece of paper that Hitler had signed and declared that he had assured, quote, peace in our time. Later, after Hitler resumed his aggression and war began, Chamberlain and the Munich Accords became infamous as the height of appeasement. And a lot of times people today will say, remember Munich, members, you don't fight aggression with appeasement. As part of his Munich diplomacy, Hitler met the Allied leaders at the Berghof on the Obersalzberg mountaintop retreat in the Alps. Hitler knew how to cajole and threaten Chamberlain, and even staged an assistant to storm into the room with fake news the Czechs were abusing German speakers in the Sudetenland. Hitler knew how to appear reasonable and even friendly at times, but was also prone to be terrifying at other times, the fits of anger. After Munich in the beginning of the war, Czechoslovakia Chamberlain was voted out of office. Only a few nights after Munich in November 1938, an anti-Jewish pogrom took place throughout Germany and Austria. Encouraged by the Nazi leaders, paramilitary forces beat and looted Jewish homes and businesses. In Kristallnacht, or Night of the Broken Glass, named for the smashed windows which glittered, like crystal, the German authorities watched without intervening as the violence spread. In the end, over 1,000 synagogues were burned. The international community was horrified, which helped shape anti-Nazi sentiment in America. A few weeks after Kristallnacht, as 1938 came to a close, American diplomats joined others in Lima, Peru, to sign the so-called Declaration of Lima. Signed on December 24th, 1938, the Declaration of Lima proclaimed that all 21 South and Central American nation signatories would oppose foreign intervention in the Western Hemisphere. While the Americans and FDR wanted to cite the threat directly of the fascists, the final agreement was nonspecific. Everyone knew, however, that it implied a collective response to any Nazi efforts to intervene in the Americas. The Declaration of Lima also illustrated that the isolationists in America were beginning to weaken on news of the Nazi atrocities overseas. In January 1939, FDR began to push Congress to spend $552 million to prepare the military for possible war. FDR wanted more soldiers, more equipment, and more bases. He later restructured the procedures the military used in spending allocated funds to allow the White House more direct control. Hitler had promised at the Munich Accords that the Sudetenland was all he wanted from Czechoslovakia. By early 1939, however, Hitler was demanding the Czechoslovakian leaders give the country's central province, Slovakia, its independence. Then, suddenly, on March 15, 1939, Hitler's troops simply seized all the rest of Czechoslovakia, which is, of course, a direct violation of the Munich Accords. France and Great Britain protested, but otherwise did nothing. Hitler then turned his attention to Poland, which had been created by the Treaty of Versailles. Now, as part of that treaty, the port city of Danzig on the Baltic Sea was designated a semi-autonomous free city in order to give Poland access to the sea, give it a seaport. The city had been part of pre-World War I Germany and consisted of a large population of ethnic Germans. And in fact, the free city separated East Prussia, still part of Germany, from the rest of Germany. Ethnic tensions flared between the Germans and the Poles, who called the city Gdansk. When tensions flared in the summer of 1939, Hitler demanded that Germany be allowed to annex the city. Worried at the time that Hitler might seize Poland was the Soviet leader, Joseph Stalin, who had come to power after Lenin's death in the 1920s. Stalin knew that Hitler hated the Slavic peoples and communism and recognized that if Germans seized Poland, they'd be right at the Soviets' doorstep. Stalin had spent, by the way, much of the 1930s collectivizing Soviet agriculture, ending privately owned farms, and creating large state-owned agricultural operations. Many Soviet citizens, including many non-Russians, had resisted, causing Stalin to send in troops and cut off trade. Estimates of deaths range from 4 to 10 million people. Now, in 1939, Stalin realized that if Hitler took Poland, the Soviets were ill prepared to defend their own country. They needed time to recover, to organize, and to build up industry and the military. Hitler, meanwhile, wanted Poland but had his own concerns. After Munich, Britain and France insisted that they would appease no more. If Germany moved against Danzig and Poland, they'd declare war. Hitler knew that if his Western neighbors declared war and, at the same time, the Soviets were dragged into the conflict, Germany would be in a two-front war, one in the West and one in the East, like World War I. Out of these concerns, therefore, came an unusual alliance, the Nazi-Soviet Non-Aggression Pact of 1939, often referred to as the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, after the foreign ministers who negotiated it. The two countries agreed not to fight and concluded a secret provision that divided Poland. Germany would take the West and the Soviets would take the East. Of course, both sides still hated the other and knew that they would eventually fight. The agreement, however, gave both sides something of value. Germany got to attack Poland and then was assured of no two-front war. It could focus its fighting on the West until it conquered Britain and France, and only then it would have to turn its attention to the Soviet Union. Stalin, meanwhile, anticipated an eventual attack, but he gained valuable time. Every day Hitler was fighting in the West was another day that the Soviet Union could prepare. Assured of no two-front war, Hitler attacked Poland on September 1st, 1939, which is often considered to be the beginning of World War II. Britain and France, who had concluded a defense treaty with Poland, declared war on Germany, and the war was set to begin. This concludes the section on events from 1938 until the breakout of World War II.